Welcome to another edition of the Inspired Stories podcast, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes and be inspired by how they've overcome adversity. My name is Anthony Codispoti, and today's guest is Bryan Ravit. He is the founder and chief sales ninja of Sales Growth Mastery, a firm dedicated to revamping sales teams through dynamic training, innovative processes, and data-driven strategies. Bryan has a proven track record, including generating over $100 million in revenue while building door-to-door sales teams for Vivid Smart Home. He currently offers performance-based coaching and consulting to various companies, tapping into his gifts for training and motivating high-achieving sales professionals. Away from coaching, Bryan is an avid investor, focusing on passive, cash-flowing alternative investments to create long-term stability and freedom. He is also exploring opportunities to acquire service businesses with strong foundations and exceptional teams. Bryan started his journey at Cutco, where a life-changing sales competition sparked his passion for exceeding limits and embracing challenges. Since then, his hunger for growth and commitment to sharing knowledge have propelled him to help others succeed. Now, before we get into all that good stuff, today's episode is brought to you by my company, Add Back Benefits Agency, where we offer very specific and unique employee benefits that are both great for your team of workers and fiscally optimized for your bottom line. Imagine being able to give your employees free access to doctors, therapists, and prescription medications. And here's the fun part. The program actually puts more money into your employees' pockets, and the company's too. One recent client was able to increase net profits by $900 per employee per year. Results vary for each company, and some organizations may not be eligible. To find out if your company qualifies, contact us today at addbackbenefits.com. All right, back to our guest today, Bryan Ravit. Thanks for making the time to share your story today.
My sincere pleasure. Happy to be here.
So, Bryan, what gave you your first taste of being an entrepreneur?
My first taste of being an entrepreneur, I would say it was actually selling, it wasn't actually entrepreneurship, but it was selling Cutco knives. That gave me some early success once I figured it out, that is. And then when I was in college at Florida State University, I was in Phi Sigma Kappa Phi Sig fraternity. A buddy of mine, because I had done pretty well and started making money, a buddy of mine had an idea of we had a keg tap stolen one too many times. So like you think of a keg for beer, well, the tap had been stolen. So he thought of the idea of a keg tap lock. So he brought it up to me and and he's like, hey, do you want to fund it? And so right then and there, I became an entrepreneur. I was like, yes, let's do it. And we got it manufactured in China. We got provisional patents. And so that was my very first little taste of entrepreneurship, kind of bled into it from selling Cutco and learning.
From the success at Cutco. So I think there was a mentor there at Cutco who really kind of pushed your buttons in a way that made you more coachable. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. That was life-changing right there. So Juan Ramos, still one of my best friends and a groomsman at my wedding. So this is going back, 20 years or so. So I remember the first day I met him, I was there's this conference and he's a pretty big dude. I'm like 5'9", he's like 6'3", he was, starting quarterback. So he's a big dude. And we're sitting down, we're at a conference and someone's speaking. And prior to that in school and everything, I never really paid attention. I was just always busy doing something other than actually listening. And I hadn't really learned yet that learning is cool. So I'm chatting up a storm and he looks at me and he's like, and it's a sales conference. He's like, have you sold more than him? And I'm like, no. And he's like, well, then you should listen. You should take notes. And I was this is the first day I met him and he's my boss. And I'm like, whoa, okay. Yeah, seems like logical. So I started taking notes, and little by little, he really shaped me into being coachable and learning. And it really opened up a whole new avenue for me.
I mean, selling knives, door to door or whatever sort of the Cutco model is, not easy. Like, what were some of the things that Juan was teaching you that helped you find success?
Yeah, so it's funny. Some people might cringe when they hear me say this, but I've been part of a lot of types of sales, and I actually think that is one of the easier things to sell.
Okay.
You start with your friends or your family, really, like your parents, and then my mom was my first sale, and then She referred me to her friends and then also family members. And you're literally taught to just read a script, like word for word, literally, and demonstrate the products. And the products are really good. And they do a really good job of training people to sell expensive stuff to random people when you have no experience. And I just kind of followed what they taught me, and it worked.
They had a good system, the referral
Phenomenal.
networks, and the
Yeah.
script that you needed to learn. And people who did this, did in your experience, most of them had success?
So that's a good question to ask. So no. So the average person back then, uh, the average person, if I remember correctly, lasted 4 days. Yeah. So the average person, so they would one of a few things, right? And so they would, I don't think it was because of lack of ability or the sales side of things, right? That might play more of a role than I'm giving credit to, but I don't think that's the big thing. They would run out of leads, right? Or people that they
Mhm.
know. Now, if someone had like, perhaps like, if someone was really, really, really growing up in like a really rough area and knew absolutely nobody and that was not in poverty, okay. But everybody else, my strong opinion is if they literally just followed the approach, it works. Like there had been, I don't know if it's this many, but I want to say, maybe a million, if not million, then let's say hundreds of thousands of people that have done it, right? So if there's hundreds of thousands of people that have done something and there's a system that is really detailed, if you just work the system, it works.
And you think where most people were falling off is maybe they didn't feel comfortable reaching out to people that they
Yeah,
knew to try to sell to them.
100%. Yeah, 100% that, or they just, they just didn't follow the program. So like there was literally word for word what you would say to ask for referrals, and it worked.
Mm.
You know, so
So
yeah,
you
I
had
think they
some
just didn't
success.
didn't put the effort.
So you had some success at Cutco. How long were you there? How long did you do that?
Yeah, and I didn't start off with great success there. By the way, I started
Okay.
off as a very average, maybe a little below average, but it was making progress. And I wound up being with Cutco, or Vector Marketing is the marketing company. Same thing though. Cutco's the product. Um, I don't know, a number of years. I would say on and off for, let's call it 5 years.
And you said you weren't immediately successful. What were some things that you think were holding you back early on that once you figured out really kind of opened the gates for you?
Yeah, and I guess it depends on how you define success, but I was very mediocre, right? Like I was selling, but it was nothing special. That's for sure. The major difference, there's actually a very specific point where I would call it the lightning strike of my life. It changed everything, and I'm happy to elaborate on that if you'd like. But the
Please.
major difference was following exactly what I was taught, the blueprint, and really working hard, like really, 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 really doubling down. Massive difference maker.
So really following the script, really following the system, not just kind of partially following it, not kind of winging it on some of the script, but following the process exactly. And then what does that mean, like really working hard, doubling down on it? What weren't you doing before that you started doing that really set things
Yeah.
on fire?
Yeah. And I can elaborate on the full story is life changing for sure. So, but to answer your question directly, so if they would say, hey, you should be making phone calls between, let's say, 7 and 9:30 at night, the early version of me would maybe get on the phones at like 8, 8:15, because I would think that it was so important to organize my notebook and this and that and everything other than actually taking action. And maybe I would stop a little early because I would have this excuse or that excuse, right? And then just all of the little things, not fully applying myself, whereas eventually it was like to the T.
Okay, so let's hear about that lightning strike moment.
Yeah. It's
That
probably one
sounds
of my
like a
favorite
fun one.
stories to tell. Yeah. And I don't know if you can see in the background, but I got a pretty big trophy. I actually found it the other day when we moved and stuck it in my office. I still have it. So I believe this is 2004, 2005. And so I had sold at this point, it was a number of years on and off, and I was in college. So at that point, I was coming back for the summer. I had sold about $17,000 of kitchen knives up to that date. Very average. It was over a long period of time. I might even be generous when I say the word average. Okay. So then, so when I went to college, actually, before that, I actually got fired from my manager, and nobody in the whole world gets fired when you're selling Cutco. It's performance-based, commission only. They will hire anybody. Okay. And no one gets fired. Well, I did. And I think the manager, I think the manager that I had at the time, I don't know that he had the best management skills at that point. But basically I missed one meeting and I wasn't performing that well. And he's like, all right, well, you don't need to come anymore. And I was like, whoa. So fast forward, and I wound up coming back, and my mom had moved when I was in college. So I was under a different manager, and then a different manager again. And so I, at this point, promoted to an assistant manager because he needed one, not because I had actually like earned it. Okay. Not because I earned it. And the guy who had fired me, he was actually my boss's boss. Not my manager, but my manager's boss. Okay. And there was this huge competition, the 10K push. So basically, think of it as like the Super Bowl of sales. It was a big deal, once a year. And any assistant managers were put on the 10K Alliance. And what that meant was you were expected to sell $10,000 over the course of 2 weeks. Now, 2 weeks. So prior to that, I don't know if I'd ever sold $2,000 in a week. And if I had, it was once ever.
So this
right?
was a
and
big
was
stretch for you. Yeah.
Yeah. This is like the most I'd ever sold in 2 weeks was probably maybe 3,000 at best. And so we go to this all-day meeting, and we're talking everything you got to do, all about it, how to do this. Everyone was going to go towards, it was called push, like a push competition. Everyone's supposed to sell $10,000 if you're an assistant manager, right? So at the end of the meeting, I go to the guy who, and if I remember correctly, Juan, as well as the guy above him who had fired me, we're next to you, and they said, hey, I just want to talk to you real quick. He said, yeah, what's going on? I'm like, hey, I'm not sure if I can sell $10,000 in 2 weeks. And like, I don't know if I can do that. And he's like, were you listening? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I know this is a 10K push, da, 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 da. And he's like, you missed it then. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I heard everything you're saying. And I just wanted to be honest. I don't know if I can do it. And he's like, then you missed the whole point of the meeting. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, the point of the push is not to sell $10,000. It's for you to put in the $10,000 worth of effort, the 10K effort. And it's not about like how much you sell. It's about who you become while you strive towards it. I still get the chills today thinking of it. And I'm like, huh. He's like, look, if you don't sell $10,000, but you give your very best, you get a 10 out of 10. That's success. You just got to do your part. And it's probably going to work out anyways. But regardless of what the results are, you do your part and you win. That's how you measure success in this. It's like, all right, well, I can commit to the effort. I can commit to the effort. And I was like, all right, I felt good about that. Right. Kind of drop the concerns. So I did exactly that. It was the first time in my entire life that I'd ever applied myself completely. And I'm going to guess since I was, I don't know, 21-ish, something like that. Maybe it was a little younger, 20. And I'd been like pretty good at certain things, but I'd never really, really like dominated at anything. And so sure enough, I set up, I got ready. It was going to be the push. They said to do everything ahead of time, get oil change, everything. I mean, get everything out of the way. Haircuts, like all you do is from like 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 at night. All you do is either you're making phone calls to schedule appointments, you're driving to an appointment, or you're doing the actual appointment. And I was all in. I told everyone I knew, everybody knew, like, I'm going to disappear for 2 weeks. And
the only way you're going to see me is if you're buying knives from me in the next
100%,
2 weeks.
Literally. Yeah, 100%. So I got off to a really good start, and I put in massive effort on the phones and this and that, and I absolutely dominated. So after the first week, keep in mind, I don't even know if I'd ever sold $2,000 in a week. After the first week, at the end of the week, I was at over $9,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was like, holy shit, right? And I go, Juan, listen, I'm at over 9,000. He's like, I know. I'm like, what if I do it again? And he's like, you're not gonna, man. You got lucky. Like, you did great, but like, come on, let's be realistic. And I'm like, F that. And I was pissed, and I slammed his door. Like, I'm surprised, like, it didn't fall off. I was so angry, and that was his full attention. full intention, because I went in the other room and I made phone calls for the next like 8 hours straight, like nonstop. And I was so fueled. And that's exactly what he was intending on doing.
That's what he wanted.
And it worked perfectly. And then I went on a vengeance and I sold over $9,000 a day. Oh, not in a day, $9,000 the following week. And then, so the competition came and like, I'm like, everyone's on stage and it's like, so with Cutco, at least the way they used to do it is everybody gets a trophy. So if you're number 10 or lower in most competitions, maybe you get some type of participation trophy, whatever. Well, if you're number like 30 or 35, you're getting something there. At least that's the way it was. So I never even got last place, no matter how many people they gave a competition to, right? So at this point, they're calling everybody on stage and they do like a countdown. And I wasn't in the room because I was still on the phone outside of this huge conference making phone calls. I'm like, I got to sell another one. It's not over. It's not over.
You were like hooked. This was like a drug for you at this point.
Yeah, it was absolutely a drug. Absolutely. It was a drug and I was addicted and I loved it. I don't know if I realized that yet, but it absolutely became a drug for me. And so anyway, so I get on stage late and I wound up winning number one out of everybody, out of like over 1,000 people. And I had like, standing ovation and this and that. And it was insane because I was so far from being the best. I remember another guy that was on stage with me, his average sale was like over 1,000. Mine was less than half of that. But I carried with me my badge of honor, which was this piece of paper. And every time I made a phone call, I put a little tick mark. And it was the ugliest piece of paper in the world. I wish I still had it. I should frame it. But it was just, I won because of effort. I tried harder than anyone, multiplied by a bunch. So I won. I still remember to this day, I sold $18,362 worth of knives. I won number one, and then I backed it up again a little bit later. And so that changed everything. Everything my whole life.
So here's something that always fascinates me is trying to understand, are people born with this kind of drive inside of them? Or can anybody, like, are you special because you're born with it? Or can anybody develop this? And what I'm hearing from you is, I don't know, maybe it was inside of you. You just hadn't unlocked it yet. What's your opinion now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've even messaged on like Facebook, like old teachers of mine, because I was a bad kid. I don't know if I can say bad kid. I was a troubled kid, I'll say. And I've even messaged them on Facebook, like asking them, like, hey, did you know I was going to be successful? Or did you think I was going to wind up in jail? And I've like, as my mom, my grandma, and I don't know that I really understand clearly like what I was like as far as drive as a kid. But I think what you said is really on point. It hadn't been unlocked yet. And I think ultimately it just comes down to priorities. And sometimes you kind of need something that can fuel you so that you can run with it. And that was my first instance of that. But I think ultimately, I always knew I wanted to have a lot of money. And then I found like a vehicle that, was it a ton of money back then? Yes. Compared to, now it isn't. No. But, as a college student, I tasted it. I made half of that, by the way. So I made $9,000 in 2 weeks as a college student. You know what I mean? So to answer your question, I think people have drive or they don't. And then they kind of pay attention to that or they pay attention to other things.
Yeah. So
non-answer.
For somebody that's listening, it's maybe in one of two spots, right? They're that person who's wondering if they've got it in them. They're trying to find the unlock, or maybe they're a manager or a coach, and they're trying to help other people, or even a parent. They're trying to help unlock this in their kids. I mean, you've trained countless number of salespeople now. What advice do you have?
Ask me the question again. So you're asking
basically like how do
they unlock it?
How do you unlock it? Yeah. Let's assume for a moment that we're assuming that it's inside of everybody, right? And maybe it is, it isn't, I don't know. But let's assume that it is. How do they unlock it? How do they find it? How do they push that button?
Yeah, it's hard. I think there's a few ingredients that really make the difference. The first thing is really connecting with the person and having a certain level of rapport. Right? So Juan was my close friend at that point, right? We were boys, even though he was older than me. He was my boss and all that. Like we were close, right? So we had a certain connection. There's trust. Okay. I knew he cared about me, right? So I'd say that's one ingredient that needs to happen. Another thing is you need to believe, or the person who you're coaching needs to believe that you're qualified or credible. So I believed that he knew better than me. So therefore I would listen, right? So that's another thing. And the other thing is it's really got to be different. I remember he used to always tell me how it was different for each person, because the way he would tell me, the way he would talk to me, he would never, like he would say, like if I spoke to this about this person, they would cry. But he's like, that just makes you mad and you take more action. And you're not mad at me. You're just mad to prove me wrong. Right. So like really catering it per person, which can be, tricky, but, that's, I'd say those three things.
What if somebody's trying to unlock it inside of themselves?
Then you got to be honest with yourself. Do you really want it? I know I've got a lot of friends, and, I know, multiple circles, right? And there's certain people that I love them as people, but like, every year they're like, I'm going to do blank. And it's like, you want that for them. You maybe even many times think that they are capable or know they're capable, but they're not going to do it. Mm-hmm. And the difference is like, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to achieve it? Right. So like during those same 2 weeks, if we go back to the Cutco example, and there's a million others, I was willing to sacrifice everything within those 2 weeks in order to do the very best that I could. Right. But there's a lot of other people that didn't, most people didn't. So it kind of comes down to that. It's like, like what is the person going to do? So many people I know, they're like, oh, I want to get out of debt, or I really like to save up for a house. And I'm like, hey, you should work, like work more, like work on Saturday. And they're like, well, no, that's, that's time for, me and my spouse. And I'm like, that's cool. You totally have, it's your life and you get to, live it however is perfect for you. But that means that person is going to get more of that balance, which is cool. Whereas the other person who is grinding on Saturday is they're going to get what comes from that.
Yeah. Tell us about the door-to-door sales teams that you've built. I mean, that's a hard job for somebody to do. What's your approach to finding
hard
success?
Sales. Yeah. So that's hard. I agree. So you said, forgive me because I cut you off. You said, what's the key to?
What was your approach to finding success? How did you make that work?
How did I make that work? Well, it started off, I guess you could say it started off the same as me learning to sell Cutco. My manager had a script, right? I watched him do it for 2 days. I got the script. I learned the script. I did what he said to do. And then I had challenges and I asked him, and then he gave me solutions. Then I asked him, and then he gave me solutions, and I asked him and gave me solutions. And then I learned it. And then I applied. So I followed what was proven, right? And I kept seeking people who are way better than me to get answers from, right? So just being hungry for the answers. And then I outworked everybody. And then I applied that same exact thing to teaching others, right?
What were you selling?
So I worked for Vivint, Vivint. So selling home security systems, smart home.
Okay. So you're knocking on somebody's door and they're like, oh, this guy, this guy looks like a sales guy. I don't want to talk to him. I'm just going to get rid of him. So you got to overcome that. You got to, like a whole way to just even sort of start the conversation. And what percentage of people do you think, once you sort of found your groove and you were good at it, what percentage of people were actually buying from you?
So should we count somebody who opens the door and slams the door as a person? If we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I might even, like, how many doors do you have to knock on to make a sale?
Yeah. So like at my peak, I would say like 10 doors, whether they answered or not.
And you'd make that sounds like a really high percentage to me.
Yeah. At my peak, right? Like really key times. There's other scenarios where I would say like 20, right? So, I'd say 20 would be average. 10's like, I'm crushing it. And these are just touching a door. And if I go to the door twice, that counts as 2, right? So I would say overall, if I'd say about somewhere between 7 and 9, let's call it 8 people answering the door, regardless of if I was able to say my pitch or not, they just opened the door, I was able to sell them
Wow.
consistently. And that includes if I go to somewhere twice, it counted twice.
That actually sounds like an incredible close rate. How does that compare to like your peers that you were working with?
It was not the best. If we look at everybody, I'd say it's not the best, but it's a lot better than it's top 1% for sure. But so many people that I knew were super skilled, whether it's from a management standpoint or from a personal sales standpoint. But so many of them, I would crush, but I would outwork them. I would outwork them by far, so they might be getting in the car at like 8 o'clock, like a normal person, because it's starting to get dark. That's pretty reasonable. And I would be knocking on doors till 10 o'clock at night, pitch black dark. And, but it's hunger,
And so aside from outworking folks, what is it that you or other folks who were successful were doing well that the people who struggled weren't?
Being coachable, seeking guidance, right? So one of the things that was really interesting is, I had a core group of top people that I was really close with. And one of the things I noticed is every one of us would very, very quickly reach out to the others for help the moment we felt like we were struggling. And us struggling might be, man, I sold one a day the last 2 days. It's like, this is horrible, because it's not fun going door to door. It is fun when you're cranking, right? That's a lot of fun, right? But it's not fun, just knocking door to door, right? So, or like if someone didn't sell, right? It's like we would reach out to each other like right away. We're like, we need to solve this. Like, I'm freaking out, right? This is horrible, right? Where someone else might go like a week or two before reaching out for help. You know what I mean? And it's just like constantly seeking better, better, better. And it's like so many times, there'd be a scenario. It's like, well, where even though I had perhaps was the number one in the office because I'm always leading from the front. And I think that's always important, but especially in door to door because it's so challenging that I would ask like, raise your hand if you listened to a sales audio this morning. And there'd be very few people. And it's like, my hand would be up, but that doesn't make any sense. If I sold more than them, if anything, it should be the other way around. But I think it was actually because, the people who are the best or doing the best perhaps might be a better way to put it. I think it's typically because they're sharpening their axe. They're working on it,
They're identifying sort of gaps in their game, and they're looking for a little bit of coaching from their peers or their managers on how they can improve.
Yeah. And I think that applies to everything. Like if you really want it and you're constantly seeking whatever it is, you're going to improve. You're going to get better. And then if you do it a whole lot, whatever it is, personal, it could be a personal thing or it could be business, you're going to make a lot of progress. And then if you just let that compound, it works.
Tell us about the boot camp style, moving out of state to eliminate distractions kind of a approach that you guys took.
Yeah, it's kind of like a money making fraternity or sports team or really positive cult. So I'm not sure which one to accurately describe it. So I worked with a lot of young people. Some were a little bit older, and it's hard, and people would want to quit. And it's easy to get distracted, and we'd work really long hours, a lot of them. In summertime was 80% of the sales. So what we would do is we would move out of state, and we had, company that furnished housing, right? For 4.5 months, a little bit crazy. So I'd always do an extra month. So it's 5.5 for me. Some others would as well. And we would go to a different state just about every single summer. Sometimes we went somewhere twice, but usually it was a different state every year. And we would all move there at furnished housing. And then Monday through Saturday, we'd have meetings and then sell all day long till 9:30 at night, plus 3 more doors. Just that extra little bit. It's like one extra rep, right? And then, Sunday we do something fun, and we all went as a team. And I think it made it so people would quit. It was easier to focus with less distractions. They didn't have friends, family there, except for like us, right? And then you kind of become a family, so you get really tight. And then the other thing is when you told all your friends and family that you're going to Colorado and you live in Florida or Texas, whatever it is, and to go do something for the summer, and then it's really hard. it's like, you just told everyone you were going there for the summer. So to quit, like,
Mm.
it's kind of like, man, they're a quitter, right? So I think it doesn't mean nobody would quit, but I think it made it so they wouldn't quit as quickly. And because of it, they would then finally catch their stride and start selling. And I really believe anyone can do it as long as they don't quit prior to figuring out how to do it or learn how to do it. It just takes some
That's
people a
an
little bit
interesting
faster
comment.
or slower.
Yeah, it's an interesting comment you made there. I really think anybody could do it. Do you?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, I
introverts,
really do.
extroverts, people with
Absolutely.
sales experience, no sales experience.
Absolutely. 100%. I actually many times preferred to have somebody with no sales experience, because then they didn't have any bad habits, teach them from scratch. They knew that they needed to learn. But yeah, I really believe, I think most things, uh, most things anybody can do if they just put their mind to it, are willing to put in the time, the effort, and learn, especially if they have someone who's willing to teach them. What's hard is if you don't have someone that's willing to teach you. But now with today, ChatGPT and AI and everything online, and you can learn from anybody. So many masterminds and this and that.
And so tell us about the performance coaching that you offer.
Yeah, so that's actually kind of happened like accidentally, if anything. And so right now I'm doing some performance-based coaching. So there's a few different companies that they reached out like, hey, we're doing high ticket sales. So one of them is like business acquisition bootcamp. Another one is SEO. And they're like, we're not closing as well as we could. And I'm like, okay, well, I could probably help. And they're like, you think so? And I'm like, well, yeah, 100%. And so basically we worked out a deal so that I help them. So by me helping them close better, I get a piece of the pie, and they win, I win. So yeah, it's based on results. It's fun.
Can you say more about like the approach that you took, or that you'd like to take? Maybe if it's appropriate,
Sure.
pick one of the clients and sort of talk through as like a case study, or if not, sort of in more generic terms.
Sure. So one of them is the Exit School. Exit School, it's a business acquisition boot camp. I know you know Amy Walker, and great organization. So they had, I don't know the exact numbers, but they had the sales weren't big at all. Very few and far between, and they have a great product, great value.
What's their
no
product?
question about it.
What are they selling?
So they sell many things, but the initial core offering, the initial one, is basically it's like a 3-day business buying boot camp. So learn how to buy a business in 3 days. It's virtual. It's not expensive at all, and it's like $5,000. And yeah, it's worth much more than double that, right? And I've done multiple programs, and it's great. So, anyways, so they weren't closing, but they just weren't explaining it enough. There's certain sales principles that if you apply them, it works for anything, right? So yeah, so I listened to a call, and I'm like, okay, I see there's like, let's call it, half of the things are good. The other half of the things, we've got to remove that or change that or this and that. Rescript it, restructure it is a big thing, right? You're saying this, and that, confused minds say no. So let's make that clear, right? Let's build more value. Let's explain this better. Let's put it in terms of the person who you're speaking to. Like, what do they care about? And then I started integrating AI, and that got pretty fun. So
Can you say more about that? How are you integrating
sure.
AI?
Sure. So there's a lot of excitement. I'm kind of obsessed on a certain degree with AI, and just all that can be done with it. So what I was doing is I was listening to a sales audio that would take me like an hour. I'd take a lot of notes. I'd get on the phone with the salesperson. Let's call it for an hour. I'd give them coaching, and then they would improve. And then that would happen again and again and again. And I'm like, well, this is great because it's working. This is not great because it takes so much time, right? But like, I know it works. So when I was with ChatGPT, I'm like, can you be my brain? If I give you and we had been recording the, AI note taker to record Zoom calls, right? And then I have my notes written. And then one of the guys that I was coaching asked if he could record the coaching calls. I was like, sure. So then we had those. He wanted to be able to listen again. But I'm like, wait a minute. So I got all those transcribed. I uploaded it, and I said, hey, could you be my brain? Like, I didn't yet realize, like, was there a method to my madness? Because I'd also just done this for an SEO agency, right? To help them start selling more. And it was like, there's some similarities, but it's different. And of course, ChatGPT, of course, said yes. I'm like, okay. Cool. So if I upload a transcript, can you tell me if they do or don't do these things? Like, yes. Can you use my wording? Can you use my coaching style? And like little by little, I kept tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it. And it's far from done. But basically the whole goal was to be able to have it. So now we've got it set up so it's automatically sending transcripts, right? It's spitting out things based on my coaching style, everything that I teach, and like all of the improvements that need to be made. Some of it's principle based, some of it's wording, like structure. There's all these things, right? And then it's giving me like, think of it as a scorecard at the end of the day. So that helps. And then the other thing I created, which man, do I wish I would have had this for door to door, because there was a lot more reps. And one of the most effective things you can do is role play with somebody, but it takes a lot of time. So I created a different AI agent that can role play with sales reps. Like so there's two different modes. One of them's the full sale, start to finish, and it'll give feedback. And then you can make it like beginner, amateur, advanced, and like keep increasing difficulty. The other one's like objection drilling. So stuff like that.
And that AI
I think there's more
agent,
to come.
is that a voice agent or is it?
That one's a voice agent.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of cool stuff there. I think eventually, I was talking to a buddy about it the other day. I'd love to create, some high ticket, like video avatars that look and sound like people that are selling, converting perfectly. So there's a lot of opportunity in the space.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a conversation with somebody recently about this, about, sort of these AI sales reps. And here's the feedback that I'm hearing is the reality is not meeting the hype. Like it's the tech is interesting and it's fascinating to have this back and forth conversation, but just sort of like when you interact with Chat GPT, like sometimes it gives you stuff that's a little weird or wonky or a little off or would sound weird to a human. Like there's some of that, but here you are, you're in the midst of it. What do you think about where the state of the tech is?
Well, I think there's some truth to that. I also think there's some very advanced things that not everybody's aware of. And I also think that it's not done yet.
Of course. But where we are today, do you think the tech is good enough to do that?
I'm actually waiting for a response from somebody who's like crazy skilled from like the engineering part. And then I think I'll have a better answer.
Fair enough.
That being said, I don't know if it's there yet, but let's just say it's not, right? Like a month from today, that could be different. So it's exciting. It's not far from out. There's certain technology that is making it better. You got to eliminate the latency and like certain things. But the other thing is, if it's so much cheaper that you can also be wrong. So it doesn't have to convert as well as a human, right? So if you're paying out X dollars for a salesperson and you don't have to pay that commission and all you're paying is data, right? Like, if you can generate leads in a meaningful way. So there's a lot of exciting things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've heard you talk a lot about how much you outwork people. Your work effort is, it sounds like second to none. Wet our whistles a little bit on some of the strategy that you maybe just pick like one big thing that when you've got a coaching client, here's a giant lever that you can pull for them so that people listening are like, they're really wrapping their heads around what Bryan Ravit can do.
Can you pick a category so I can give you an answer?
I guess sales is too general.
I'll answer it this way. Tell me if this answers the question. We can answer it with sales, but I guess you look for the gaps. So you look for the gaps, like what is not taking place yet, or not taking place as well yet, right? Or what kind of objections are they getting, right? So everything is a symptom of something else. Maybe perhaps that's the answer that would be most helpful. So if you are having a symptom of a certain objection, right? Well, there's a root of that. Like, why are you getting that? There's a reason, it's either because of something you're doing or not doing, right? So you have to figure out, well, what should you do or what should you stop doing? Does that answer the question?
A little bit. I think so. I think what you're saying is, say you've got an 8% close rate and you really think it should be 15, right? Or 20. And so what you want to do is you want to go back and you want to study. Hopefully you've got transcripts, or maybe you've just kept good notes on, here's the objections that, top 5 objections I typically run into. And so then you want to look at those objections. You want to look at their sales script, their sales process, and say, okay, how can we fix these objections, right? Either you're saying something that is causing this objection to pop into somebody's mind, or you're not saying the right things that when they just naturally have the objection, that you don't have a way to answer it. Is that roughly the right?
Yeah, that correct. That it's to say the same thing you just said in a different way. It's also patterns. And sometimes it's the words, sometimes it's the sequence of the words or the aspects of the sale that can actually really move the needle a bunch, and then sometimes it's something, what's happening before the sales interaction, that can be a massive difference mover.
Before the interaction, so the sales call is arranged, somehow it's been scheduled, but before the salesperson and the prospect actually talk, there's some kind of communication that can take place. You send them a PDF or a video link or something like that.
Yeah, perfect. So let's just say it's a Zoom call, like a high ticket sales environment. Yeah. So you send them, you're giving them things related to credibility, give them content ahead of time, right? Videos. They've got a chance to learn more about you, right? So they know more about you. They feel more comfortable. They know that you're an expert because they just heard you do X, Y, Z. So in that environment, that could be the case. Another thing, it could be, whether it's reviews, right? Something as simple as reviews, or like in door to door. One thing that would make a massive difference is you could, like, I would place my signs, think of like ADT sign, right? Vivint was orange sign. I would place them strategically so it was very obvious as someone's driving through the neighborhood, you can't miss them. So that would create some curiosity. Plus, I'd get social media posts all throughout the neighborhood from every person that I sold. So everyone's talking about how happy they are. They met me and they did this and they did this, right? And, in most environments with door to door, everyone's just saying negative things. So all of a sudden, everyone's saying positive things, right? You're just doing a good job making people happy. Then, like, you're spreading that, right? And then, the best way to handle an objection is before it comes up. So that could be wording, that could be anything, but it's like, what happened first?
Don't wait necessarily for the client, the prospect, to say, hey, I don't like having cameras in my home. I don't think I want your security system. You address that right out of the gate. Hey, a common thing that we hear is that some people don't want cameras in their home. And here's why it's a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. And then if you understand the reasoning even behind that, then you can say, most people are there thinking, well, I don't want anyone to see me. So I just want to rest you assured that everything's private, secure, da, 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 da. Yeah.
Interesting. And for you to provide this kind of performance-based coaching, how well do you need to understand their product or their industry?
Less than I think most people would think. Much, much, much less. It matters more who's buying this, why are they buying this? Like, what have they experienced, generally speaking, prior to this, right? That stuff matters depending on the type of sale, right? But the actual product doesn't matter as much. Mm-hmm. It's more of like just understanding this is what moves the needle. Because you could have the best product or service in the world, but if you're not articulating it correctly, the value might not be received by the prospect.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, how are they receiving it? If value is higher than price, people buy every time as long as they physically can.
Do you have any data you can share? Like, took this client from X conversion rate to Y conversion rate?
I'd say generally speaking, very generally speaking, it varies, right? I'd say somewhere between 10% lift, which would be pretty low, like really low, to like 3 times. So that someone's at 10% closing, maybe you get them to 30, maybe you can get them to 60. you know? So it depends. So it really varies. And I hate when someone won't give like quantified numbers. It's like, well, there's an average, right? But it's like such a wide spectrum. But yeah, overall, I'd say more than 9 out of 10 times, there's massive improvement that can be had. And, it makes sense to optimize. You want to optimize in every aspect. And sometimes you just need an extra, you need someone that's their specialty, or just somebody that's the one thing they're focused on. Because it can be hard as a business owner. You've got 100 hats to wear, right? Like how much, sometimes get somebody on it and can see some huge results. So maybe 50% improvement. If I had to give a straight answer, but it just depends.
Substantial.
Yeah. That's massive.
So Bryan, you are having a lot of fun in the sales world. You got hooked on the drug back at Cutco when you found some success there, continued with Vivint. You're doing a lot of performance-based sales coaching now for clients. Clearly, this is a happy place for you. You're all lit up. I can tell there's a lot of enthusiasm, excitement, but you've got another happy place too. Tell us what else that you're working on now.
Sure. And the funny thing is the performance-based sales coaching and consulting and partnerships, that's actually a pretty small piece of it. That's just kind of something that just happened because I kept getting asked. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll help. And that being said, my happy place, as you said, is definitely, I love investing. I'm obsessed with alternative investing specifically.
What does that mean? What is alternative investment?
So alternative investing is, if I had to simplify it, I'd say everything other than the stock market. I'm sure I'm invested, in the stock market, at least on some degree, but a really small degree compared to most as far as a percentage of portfolio. So alternative investments, to give some examples, usually with private equity of some form. So it could be real estate. Okay. It could be privately owned companies, whether that's early stage, like venture capital, or later stage, right? Like traditional private equity, hard money loans, all sorts of asset class in real estate, cannabis, you name it. So there's quite a few examples, but things that are not publicly traded on the stock market, just to generally speak.
And how are you finding these opportunities?
So it started off with, I joined, one of the best decisions I've ever made is actually joining the Lifestyle Investor Mastermind. There's a great book as well. I'd highly recommend it, by Justin Donald. And it's a high net worth investment mastermind. And when I joined, I didn't know, I was one of the originals, and I didn't know, it was 2020, and I didn't know anything about investing at all. Not at all. I knew I always wanted to be an investor eventually, but I didn't actually know anything about it. And so they have deal flow quite a bit. And then they spend many hundreds of thousands of dollars to vet deals and do due diligence to make sure they're good and meet certain standards. And then they also educate you on it. And then also tax savings is a big thing. So that was my entry point. And then I got hooked.
And so it's through this mastermind that a lot of these opportunities come up?
That's how it started. Yeah. So I get a lot of deal flow from that. And actually now I lead a small group. So Lifestyle Investor, it's expensive. At the time of the recording, it's $55,000 a year to be a member, just to belong. And so I actually started a smaller group as well with just some of my friends that were like, hey, I'm not going to spend that much and I don't want to put as much time, but I do want to see deals. But that's where the deal flow started. And then I've done a lot of deals. And so then I get more deals sent to me from these sponsors. But think of it as the companies raising the money, and then also friends or friends of friends and that kind of thing. And just getting more and more connected in this space. And, like recently, is actually, I'm an advisor for the company, and recently a little money for it. I just invested in a company called Feel 30, men's health brand. So just to give you an example, I met the founder, Thomas, from the Lifestyle Investor. He was a member, right? And then we kept in touch, and then he's raised money, and then, kind of putting the deal together, which is pretty cool.
So how many investments would you guess that you've made?
I had a guess, I'd say around 50.
It's
close to it.
How do you keep track of them?
I think that's the most common question I get, actually. Excel.
Okay.
Excel is the answer, but I've also invested in a great company called Copia, and they're doing some really, really, really cool things. Advanced, it's software for high net worth individuals and institutions to track, because alternative investing, it's not like you can just log into Fidelity and see it all. You know, it's not as organized as that, and there's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of tax, a lot of K1s, a lot of forms to get, and then it's like, how is it doing compared to projections and different asset classes, and it goes on and on and on. But yeah, it all starts with just rows in Excel and then more columns than than
And
anyone would think is normal.
how often are you sort of checking in or getting updates from each of your investments?
Yeah, so it depends on the deal. I'd say some of them will send you like monthly updates. Like, here's the return, here's this. Some things are a lot more cut and dry than others. Like, I'm in a handful of hard money loans, and I can elaborate on any of these. So that's like pretty cut and dry. So I'm getting a report every month. There's other things that I'm in that I'll get reports quarterly. And then there's certain companies like a green coffee company. They're the largest privately held Colombian coffee company, set to IPO within the next few years. They're dominating. And so they're sending updates. It seems like daily, like, hey, we just made a new partnership. Hey, we just did this. Hey, we just did this. But most of them are less frequent than that. Like yesterday, I got an update from a mobile home park fund that I'm in. There's a quarterly updates, and there's apartments, and there's a lot of things.
Is there a space or a couple of spaces, industries that you're particularly excited or interested in right now?
Yes. But it also, for me right now, I'm going to be investing quite a bit in privately held companies with a goal of cash flow and potentially a roll up. Putting a bunch together and selling for a pretty big exit. That's where my attention's about to be going in a major way. But overall, I'm also very bullish on crypto, Bitcoin specifically, and AI. And there's so many asset classes. And it's like, at first I just thought of like real estate as a whole, right? I just didn't know better. And now I'm like, okay, real estate, well, wait a minute, we can break that down into quite a few different categories, right? So mobile home parks, I've been bullish on that for a while. RV parks, I think there's a space for that as well. So yeah, it depends on what the goal is the real answer.
Say that again.
It depends on what the goal is the real answer. For instance, if someone wants cash flow, like passive income, right? That they should really be looking at different investments than for someone who's like, hey, I want massive growth. Right?
Oh, okay. So pick each of those buckets, Bryan, and what would you recommend for somebody in each of those buckets?
Well, I'm not a financial advisor, so you should speak with your financial planner before making any decisions.
What would you do yourself if you were in categorizing yourself in one of those buckets?
I would start by learning. A lot of these investments, the minimum is 50 grand, 100 grand or more. So I'm very bullish on quite a few things, but for someone who hasn't done it, I'd be really hesitant to be like, hey, go invest in them because, whatever. What I would say is start by learning. You can join masterminds. I think that's a huge, huge thing. For me, it's been great. Start perhaps with reading the book, Lifestyle Investor. I didn't write it. It's amazing though. And maybe even before or after that, start by getting really clear with what you want. And it matters where you're at. Like, how much money somebody has. Do they need the money soon? Right. So for me, because I've been looking for the right business to buy and really the right opportunity to pounce on, what's mattered a lot for me over the last couple of years is liquidity. So I haven't been willing to lock up my money even when I see a great investment, right? Which is painful for me. But there's it's where are you at, in your life, right? So that's going to change, and then I'm going to be all about locking up money for the right deals. So if you don't necessarily care about liquidity, right, then.
So what space do you want to do this roll up in?
I'm definitely open-minded, but I've got a few things going that if you had to say, Bryan, place $1 bet, what's it going to be in, right? Only $1. I'm not a gambler, but I'd say roofing if I had to guess.
Roofing. Yeah. Interesting choice.
Yeah.
Why?
And so there's a lot of industries, right, that I've been looking at. So I'm not married to that. But the number one reason I would say is I can apply door-to-door sales skills, right? So that's a big bonus. It's still fragmented. private equity is buying them up, right? At decent multiples, but I think, the bigger you can grow it pretty damn big, right? With sales teams, like just like I've had before, to like massive numbers, because roofs are expensive compared to, a small, cheap widget. So that's part of it. And the other thing is, what's really interesting to me, I was talking to a buddy about this the other day, who owns a roof company, potentially getting involved with it actually. And so when you look at alarm sales or solar sales, like major door-to-door industries, and even some pest control, the leadership and the organizations, there's a good amount of them, or there's at least one or multiple that are really on point. They really have their systems in place, amazing leadership, incentive trips, where they send people around the world, or Mexico or Hawaii, whatever, swag, you name it, like really well-oiled machines, like, big, billion-dollar companies. But that I've seen, there's not really anything like that in the roofing space, which is interesting. And when one of the things I've learned is, when you build a company, if you want really, really good salespeople, you have to be willing and able to pay really good money, right? And I shadowed somebody for a few hours, and I think it was 7 hours, and he made like a little over 13 grand. And he's like, yeah, that was like kind of smaller than usual. And I'm like, well, that looked pretty easy compared to what I've seen. So I was like, that's kind of interesting, but ultimately, I'm not married to the industry.
All right. Let's shift gears, Bryan. I'd like to maybe dive into a serious challenge that you've overcome in your life. How'd you get through that? What'd you learn?
Which challenge? Man, I've had a lot of challenges. So, the first one that comes to mind is, I'm really grateful and, can humbly say that I've done really well financially at this point. But that wasn't always the case, so, even though, right now, I'm a multimillionaire, and I say that humbly, hopefully to inspire, not to brag, but to inspire others. But what I can also say, with the goal of inspiring, is at a certain point I had $100,000 in debt. So I would say that was one of the big challenges, and that's the first one that comes to mind. And just to kind of elaborate on that a little bit, I had started a DVD kiosk business. Think of like Redbox, like a DVD rental machine, right? Like an ATM, but for DVDs. And I raised money from it, from a hedge fund manager that I met from selling Cutco, really close friend of mine, Mark, awesome guy. And actually now I invest with him, which is kind of cool, and very cool actually. And so at first it wasn't working. And what I mean by that is, it wasn't making money. So at a certain point, he's like, when he calls me, he's like, hey, Bryan, it's looking like, I'm looking at the numbers, and just, they're not good enough. Like, and I'd been receiving like a small salary. This is very early 20s, like right out of college. And he's like, so like it's okay. Like I put my blessing on it. It's like, it's okay if this doesn't work. He's like, I knew that investing, but I invested. Like, I'm okay either way, right? And I was like, thank you, but I'm not done yet. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I haven't failed. Like, I'm not going to quit, and I haven't failed. He's like, yeah, but the business doesn't support paying you. And I'm like, okay, no problem. Let me see if I can figure this out. And then I went for quite a while working without income, right? And I didn't have a bunch of money set aside, right? That's why I'd raised money. And I kept going. And I wound up accumulating a good amount of debt while doing it. And the funny thing is, I eventually figured it out, and we just had to change a few things, and it was making money. But at that point, we were about to raise more money. That was the whole plan. And then I'm looking at numbers, and then I realized, Netflix and every way we stream video, I'm like, that's going to be bigger tomorrow, not smaller. And I felt like it was unethical to actually raise more money with something that would, like, I was literally making projections like, well, what if they go down? And I'm like, who raises money when they think the industry is going like a different direction? Like, that's not the right thing to do, whether we can raise it or not, because the numbers were pretty good, right? But I didn't think it was the right thing to do. So ultimately we wound up pulling the plug on that. And I'd accumulated a good amount of debt. I think it was a little less than that, but right around, 100 grand or not that far from it. And, ultimately, uh, it taught me like tunnel vision and focus. So when like, I wish I still had it. I remember taking a screenshot at a certain point, and, the screenshot was of my bank account being negative, and I saved it as never again. And I dated it. I don't know what the date was. And, like I can remember that, like typing hard on my keyboard, never again. You know what I mean? And, so it was this fun tunnel vision though, just staying focused, and I was able to keep operating, and it was actually really valuable. And then wound up, eventually it was like, all right, I moved on, started another thing, right? And paid off. And then
So
things have
you were
worked out.
$100,000 in debt. Was there any thought about bankruptcy? Was it that kind of a situation?
Yeah. 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 And, my family, I think they were even encouraging it. They're like, you gotta do this, gotta do this. And, I have an amazing family, but none of them had done what I want. None of them had achieved what I want to achieve. Right. And I think it's important. I said earlier, it's important to like learn from somebody who's credible and qualified, not just who loves you, but that's a piece of it, but they also have to be qualified. Right. So they had encouraged that. So I was like, all right, so I actually did speak to a few bankruptcy attorneys, and I'd asked them, and what, they all said the commonality. I think I spoke to two or three of them. And they said, well, the reason to do, I'm like, should I follow it? Like, I don't know. And they're like, well, it depends. And I'm like, what does it depend on? They're like, it depends on whether you believe you can get out of this or not. Basically, like, are you screwed or not? And I'm like, no, I'm going to get out of this.
You believed you could get out of it.
I knew I'd get out of it.
And how did you get out of it? What were the changes that you made in the business to level things out?
It wasn't because of changing the business. It definitely wasn't because of that. No, because we wound up not raising money. I wound up saying, okay, so I actually kept operating it for a while, like after I was done with it. Because I told Mark, I'm like, hey, he asked me when we were having the conversation about me raising money. He's like, what happens if like it doesn't work? Like, do I just get a bunch of machines? And I'm like, I'll run it for as long as I physically can, even if that means without money. So I did. So, but that was like a really minimal time at that point. So it was relatively easy to do that, but you said, how did I get out of it? So I wound up, I did a lot of different things. I wound up owning my own home security company, for a bit before I really crushed it with Vivint. And, so that helped. I started paying it off very aggressively, like big time with that. And then, I got some good advice as far as like paying off, the highest, you pay off the highest interest first, and then you can actually negotiate quite a bit. And, so I made some pretty ridiculous offers and got them accepted. And, it's all business. And, for anyone who's in debt listening to this, you should know, if you don't already know, the worse it is, the better it is for you. And what I mean by that is, if you're a little bit behind, like, you owe all of it, right? If they've already sold off the debt, maybe they've sold off for 25, 35, 50 cents, right? But like at a certain point, they think that you're never going to pay, and they just keep selling it off to someone else. And it winds up being 10 cents on the dollar or less. So if they collect 15 or 20 cents on the dollar, they just doubled their money, right? If I can double my money like that all day long, right, as an investor. So, I was thinking of it like that at the time, but I was thinking like, hey, I knew they got it cheaper, and a friend of mine, my wife's actual boss, Fahim, he's actually the one who told me that. And, he had, or boss way back when, but anyways, he said, yeah, just make crazy offers. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, just try it. I'm like, all right. I don't mind getting rejected. And sure enough, they accepted it. So I was just paying off. And then when I came to Vivint, and I started, making some really good money right away, then I just wrote a few checks and it was done. And
Gotcha.
Part of that debt, by the way, the worst part was I borrowed money from my mom. And my mom didn't have the cash to loan me. So she took out a loan for it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there was no negotiating that. I never missed a payment ever. And, that was like, had to pay that. But yeah, so I got through it, made me stronger. And, if you think you can, or you think you can't, either way, you're right. So.
I like that. I've just got one more question for you, Bryan, but before I ask it, I'm going to let listeners know the best way to get in touch with you, which is you can find Bryan on LinkedIn. Bryan is Bryan and Ravit is Ravit. So Bryan Ravit, you can search for him on LinkedIn. Also Ravit, Ravit, Ravit Investments with an S on the end of it, ravitinvestments@gmail.com. And we'll include links to that in the show notes. Also, as a reminder, if you want to get more employees access to benefits that won't hurt them financially and carries a financial upside for your company, reach out to addbackbenefits.com. And finally, if you'll take just a moment and leave us a comment or review on your favorite podcast app, we will be forever grateful. So last question, Bryan, you and I reconnect 1 year from today and you're celebrating something big. What's that big thing you hope to be celebrating?
I'm going to give two things if I can. The first thing I'm most excited about is my daughter. My daughter, Gemma Noreen, she's due to be born October 25th. So we'll see when she decides to arrive, but I'm really fired up about that. So it's my first kid, and she might be my little princess. So super fired up about that. And so that's the first thing. And the second thing is, hopefully I'll have either partnered or purchased or invested in something that's going to ultimately result in 8-figure exit, and I'll be going all in on that and probably easing up on the other things. So that's the real goal. I'm excited to pour my heart into something again and really build. That's fun for me.
Love it. Bryan Ravit, I want to be the first to thank you for sharing both your time and your story with us today. I really appreciate it.
My most sincere pleasure. Thank you.
Folks, that's a wrap on another episode of the Inspired Stories podcast. Thanks for learning with us today.